can cut out the beginning of it. Hello, Mrs. Davis. Welcome to your oral exam. Today we're going to be going through a variety of questions. We'll have about 30 minutes, and I'm hoping to get a good sense of how much of the material from this semester's class you've grasped and understood. Please answer to the best of your ability. If you're not sure about something, you can ask for a hint, or you can punt on it and we'll just try something else. You'll be graded on a rubric based on the thoroughness with which you answer questions, how readily you can answer questions without tons of prompting. You kind of get the picture, I think. Don't be afraid to tell me you don't know an answer. I have lots of questions, so I know we covered a lot of material this year, and I'm willing to believe that you might have gotten some things better than other things. So, without further ado, we're going to start with a theory section. So, if you can, please name the major categories of theories discussed in this class and give a brief explanation of each type.
Okay. The first type of theories are the foundational theories. These theories are based on historically psychology theories that came before them, and they basically look at psychosocial development and cognitive structural development. The second type of theories are the integrative theories, and these ones are a little bit more complex. They look across multiple dimensions of development, but really more adding different levels of complexity to the development analysis, so adding in context or different categories of development in the same theory. So these are a little more complex. And then the third type are the social identity theories, and these focus on mostly individual social identities, but there are some, particularly the Jones-McEwen theory, which look at multiple dimensions of social identity and try and figure out how they relate to each other.
Thank you. Okay, let's explore the integrative set of theories a little more. Can you list at least 3 integrative theories of student development and give a brief overview of each?
Okay. One integrative theory is Bronfenbrenner's ecology theory. This looks at how the college environment impacts student development. So it looks at kind of different levels of the environment, from small microsystems to a larger network of macro systems and exosystems that would impact a student during their time at college. A second theory is Baxter-Magolda's theory of self-authorship. This theory looks at how students move from following external formulas or ideas and concepts that they get from other people, such as their parents commonly, or other influences, and then how they move from that into coming up with their own opinions and their own ideas and their own understanding of the world. Then a third theory is Schlossberg's transition theory, which looks, in general, it's an adult development theory that looks at how people go through transition, focusing on what different components of the transition impact the person's ability to cope with it, including looking at personal aspects, what support is available to them, what type of transition it is, was it a surprise or was it expected, and that sort of thing.
Seems like a good answer. Why don't we explore Baxter-Magolda a little more? Can you select one theory that you listed and provide a detailed explanation of its constructs, so specifically the Baxter-Magolda theory?
Okay. So Baxter-Magolda's theory of self-authorship follows 4 phases of development, and it covers 3 different categories of development. So the 3 categories are cognitive development, intrapersonal development, and interpersonal development. And so cognitive development is basically knowledge. Who am I? How do I know things in the world? Intrapersonal development is learning about yourself and how do I do things. And then interpersonal development is learning about relationships and basically how do I interact with other people. And so in each of those three areas, an individual can move through the 4 phases of development. And they can be in different stages at different times, different phases. For this theory, they're called phases, at different times. So the 4 phases are starting with external formulas. So that means that the individual is coming up with their view of the world and their understanding of the world and of themselves based on ideas and concepts that they've gathered from other people, such as their parents or their religion or the media or whatever it is that's influencing them. And they start to move into the second phase, the crossroads phase, when they start to question some of those ideas and concepts that they have been basically following blindly. So in the crossroads phase, they start to question and wonder, okay, why is that the right way to do it? Is that the right way to do it? What other ways are there? And going into this phase might be triggered by discovering that there are other ways of doing things or that people think differently, and trying to figure out which way is the right way. And then the student or individual will transition into the third phase, which is self-authorship, when they are starting to solidify their own opinions, their own ideas, and their own concepts of, how do I make decisions and who am I and how do I relate to others. And then they can transition into the fourth phase, which is developing their own internal formulas, and that's when they really get kind of settled in their understanding of how the world works and how they work. And so it's moving from an external to an internal formulas, basically.
Are there any major assumptions associated with the Baxter-Magolda theory of self-authorship?
I think the one assumption is that I know that the research that this theory is based on was done in a relatively non-diverse group of students. So it's kind of assuming that what these students said is going to apply to people who have different backgrounds than them. And this is one criticism that's been made of this theory. So I think that's an assumption that people make when they try to apply this theory to people who have, the non-white, I think it was white middle class kind of background. This theory may not apply to them the same way, just because they might experience things earlier or later depending on their different backgrounds.
I think you've covered that pretty well. So let us proceed. Can you give an example? You mentioned that there are a couple different phases in the Baxter-Magolda theory. Can you give an example of a situation or event that would cause an individual to move between phases of this theory?
Sure. So a pretty significant event is going to college. So I think that a lot of college students, based on what we've talked about in class, a lot of college students come in to college in the first phase, the following external formulas phase. So, and while they're in college, it's common for students to be exposed to a lot of different ideas, different ways of looking at the world, people from diverse backgrounds, different things they can study that bring new ideas into their life. And so a lot of being exposed to all of this can cause a student to start to question maybe some of the external formulas that they came into college with, which would shift them into the crossroads phase.
Can you paint a picture for me? A student named Janet who comes to you?
All right, so if the student comes from a very non-diverse part of the country and she's not known anybody with different background from her, maybe she's a white middle class student, she comes to college and maybe her roommate is an African American student from a lower class background and has a lot of different opinions and ideas and cultural experience than what Janet has. And so this relationship might cause her to learn more about the world and how it works and question some of the previously held notions she had about racial relations or politics or religion or other major held beliefs that she has might be challenged by some of the different experiences that her roommate shares with her.
Can you talk about what advice you'd give Janet if she comes to you and is having trouble with this migration, this motion between phases?
Sure. I would try to listen to her first of all and understand where she is in the process and how she's reacting to it. Sometimes people can be very defensive or sometimes they can be very curious. So it would be helpful to understand how she's reacting to some of the differences she's experiencing. I would also then ask her questions to understand what she's tried to do to learn more about the topics that she's learning about. So maybe she's done some reading, or maybe she's talked to different people, or maybe she hasn't. And so maybe I would encourage her to seek out different resources depending on what she's tried. So maybe having her go to the Multicultural Center and try to develop more friendships so that she can get a more diverse perspective on things. Or if she's not, maybe she's shyer, maybe she'd prefer to read about things first, maybe I could ask some people at the Multicultural Center for books that would be helpful for her to read to learn about different ideas. And then I would try to keep checking up on her and try to make sure that, the challenges that she's facing aren't, interfering with her roommate or, causing conflict, but hopefully helping her to see that it's good to learn new things and question things and, develop in that way.
Does Baxter and Magolda's theory give comments on how students might, or like what issues students might deal with based on the external authorities from phase 1 who might be trying to keep them from moving to phase 2?
I don't know if the theory itself mentions that. Certainly it mentions that there can be influences that make it harder to move through different phases.
Can you talk about one?
An influence?
Mm-hmm.
I think parents are a pretty obvious influence. That's pretty challenging to overcome because the student does go back to their parents, pretty regularly on breaks or, at least a couple times a year. So it may be challenging for them to experience new developing beliefs at college and then go home and try to keep the same beliefs when they're at home and be the same person in both places. Particularly challenging when you're in the crossroads phase and you're not sure where exactly you fall and what exactly you believe. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
It does. Thank you. Okay, the next thing I'd like to talk about is criticism. Can you talk? You mentioned the diversity issue related to Baxter-Magolda. Can you talk more about that criticism or another criticism of the Baxter-Magolda theory?
That's the biggest criticism, I think, of her theory, was with the fact that it was with such a homogeneous population that she was doing her research. So the theory is based on that. So I know that it's been questioned, whether this can be applied to diverse student population. And there are, Baxter-Magolda herself is working, I believe, with another researcher to look at Latina students and how they experience the same sort of self-authorship process. And I believe there are other researchers that are also looking across different racial and ethnic backgrounds to see how the process might differ.
Okay, so can you talk about a study that might be done to improve this theory?
Yeah, I think what Baxter-Magolda and Torres are doing is looking at Latino and Latina students and I think asking kind of the same questions that she did in her original study, but then focusing on trying to figure out what might be different for them and how they experience the process differently. So I think following kind of the same methodology as she did originally, but then using a more diverse population.
Okay. Can you comment on a sample size you think would be necessary to claim that an expanded theory would be diverse enough to apply to a wider variety of students?
I believe her first study was based on a group of 30 students, or I think it started out larger, but then ended up being about 30 that were in the longitudinal study for many years, which led to the self-authorship model. If that was sufficient for the first theory, then I would suggest that as a benchmark for future studies as well.
Okay. Are there different variables that you'd be really interested in exploring in order to assert that you were being diverse enough with your population?
Do you mean like making sure that you have a certain percentage of people from certain backgrounds?
That'd be an example. So are there particular backgrounds you think would be really important to study and others that you might discard? Or are there other characteristics of students that can range very widely and that you'd want to make sure that you are taking into consideration?
I think they would want to include all backgrounds to make it a universally applicable theory. So I don't think there's anybody you would want to discard.
Well, you only mentioned 30 students.
Yes, but you can get people that have a variety of backgrounds within 30 students.
Okay. I guess that's fair. How long of a longitudinal study do you think would be necessary?
She's still doing her other study. I think it's been going for 30 plus years at this point. She started it when they were in college and they're now in their 40s, so maybe 20 years she's been doing it. So I don't know. I guess you do it for at least for the self-authorship part. She got that out of her study of them in college, and then through their 20s, I think, was when she then published that theory. So she may come up with something different from the study of them in their 30s and 40s, but so I guess maybe 10 to 15 years is probably what she was looking at for that data.
Okay, good. So, let's see how we're doing on time. You've used up about 20 of your 30 minutes, so we're going to move to an application section. Okay, the first question. What role does student development theory play in the day-to-day practice of student affairs?
Well, I think everybody uses some form of informal theory in their decision-making process, and as they're planning their student affairs work, they're basing their decisions on something, whether it's a gut instinct or experience or somebody else's experience or something. But this informal theory is not necessarily supported by any sort of research. It may not be the best option. It may, in fact, be harmful for all you know, because there's nothing really that it's being supported by. So I think it's important to have formal theories so that you have something that you know is based on research and can be supported by, somebody actually going out and trying to figure out what works. And it's also being updated so that you know it's remaining relevant, whereas somebody's experience who's been working in the field for 30 years may not actually be updating their strategies based on the changes in students who are coming into college. So I think that's one key part of theory. Theory can also help explain what's going on in a situation and give terminology with which to express a challenge. So it gives you a little bit of structure to talk about the struggles and the processes that students go through in college, and helps with communication within the field and understanding of, just what is going on.
Okay, so I know that the field of student affairs has not been an official field where you need to get a degree in it in order to work in it for an incredibly long period of time. So once you've gotten your master's degree and go out into the real world, it's quite possible that you'll have coworkers who don't have a background in theory that you've got. Now, you said that their intuition, which may be what they're using to work, could be wrong. how would you handle a situation where you have a coworker who's proposing a solution to a problem or a method or something, and frankly you think it's just totally stupid? How would you deal with that situation?
Well, I would ask a lot of questions to try and understand why they think it's a good idea. Have they tried it before? Have they seen someone else try it before? That sort of thing. If they have tried it before, try to understand, okay, what happened last time? Was it effective? Clearly, if it wasn't effective, or if there were challenges facing with it, that would make it easier to direct them in another way. However, if they did do it before and think it was effective, that would be the most challenging situation. I think I would need to do some research in that case to find out do some comparison of what they did in similar situations at other schools, or are there any white papers on this subject or in this area of expertise to talk about best practices and kind of bring that sort of information to them, particularly up-to-date recent things that maybe could supersede what they've done before in the past simply because it's more recent, more relevant.
Okay. So kind of a related question to this. Once you have a real job, you're not going to be able to spend all of your time reading papers and books. You'll have, work to do managing the affairs of a college. So to what extent, or how important do you think it is for student affairs professionals to remain up to date with the latest research? Or do you think they can kind of coast on what they learned in school?
Well, I think it's definitely important to stay up to date because a lot of stuff is changing in this field faster than a lot of other fields, I think, in more relevant ways maybe, because it is such a young field and is very new, and there's a lot of new things that have come out, even just in the past 5 or 10 years. So, definitely need to keep up to date with that. I don't think it's necessary for a practitioner to be reading, every single new paper that comes out, but at least skimming through the titles of papers that are coming through the Journal of College Student Development, and, if you see something that looks relevant or that you don't remember exactly what that theory is talking about, or if that might be related to something I'm doing, then maybe reading in more depth, but trying to at least keep up a little bit with what the changes are and what theories are being updated, so that if you do apply certain things or reference them in your work, you're applying the most recent version and not a version from 20 years ago if that's been updated since then.
Okay. So what arguments might your future student affairs coworkers provide against using student development theories?
Well, I think a lot of people don't like to be quite so formal. Maybe they think there are other more relevant sources of knowledge, like experience, or what we've always done, or things like that. So you need to overcome that and say, well, we can develop new ways of doing things that have more of a basis. Other arguments can include the fact that they don't have the knowledge and it's going to be too much time to acquire the knowledge, or too much time to keep up with the theories, as you mentioned. Also, sometimes people think that it'll be expensive if they think you have to purchase, instruments or things to administer to students. And let's see. Yeah, those were a couple arguments.
Okay. Can you explain what you say or do to overcome 2 of the arguments that you listed?
Sure. So, as mentioned, with people who think that their experience or other sources of knowledge are going to be more relevant than the theory, I think it would be important to bring up examples of theory that had been applied to practice in my own experience or in the experience of other universities. So this is where it's important to be in connection with practitioners at other schools through conferences or professional organizations, so that I can bring up examples. The other thing would be in terms of time. It'd be important to show them that you don't have to read all the papers in order to be able to apply the theory. Just having basic understanding can add to the effectiveness of your student affairs practice, and making it easy for them, maybe providing a simple website or posters or something that kind of simplifies it and makes it more friendly than a long paper in a journal. Find creative ways to introduce the ideas and the concepts within the office.
Okay, so those are some arguments in favor of theory and some support of that. Can you talk about the cautions you might give to a new student affairs practitioner on the appropriate use of theory? Are there limitations?
Yes, definitely. I think that a key thing is to remember that students are individuals, and the theory is based on several individuals and shouldn't be applied to a specific individual as if it was, the law or something. So the theory should be used to help you describe a situation, but not to prescribe an answer to a student or prescribe a certain course that the student needs, pathway that the student needs to follow. So that's one thing. A second caution would be against applying just one theory to a situation and applying the whole theory and assuming that it will describe everything about the situation. It's important to combine different theories because a lot of situations are more complex than an individual theory is going to take into account. So pulling concepts and ideas from different theories in order to understand the complexities of a situation. Let's see, what's another caution?
Could you talk a bit about the effect of how students are perceived?
By a student affairs person?
Yeah. So are there any risks that theories might give in how a practitioner might look at a student?
Yeah, I think a practitioner might be tempted to think of a student as a project, something that I'm going to get this student from point A to point B, and I'm here as the mad scientist trying to manipulate the circumstances so that the student will get to the point where I think they need to be, or something like that. So it could feel like an experiment or something where we're in control, but that's not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be just a way for us to help support and challenge the student, but the student is really the one who is directing their own path.
Okay, good. Can you give an example from your own work and explain how you responsibly applied some of the theory you've learned this semester to a situation you encountered?
Yes. So when I was working with the Hypatia students, I was doing mid-semester meetings with each student where we were talking through their adjustment to college and how they were doing in their classes and everything, any questions or issues that they were facing. And one student was talking, I asked her, whether she still thought engineering was the right choice for her, and she was saying, well, I'm not sure. I thought it was definitely the right choice, but I'm not enjoying all my classes. And I asked her more about why did she think it was the right choice, and she talked about how her parents encouraged it, and she was good at math and science, and it would make a lot of money. And so to me, this said that, especially her comment about her parents and the fact that, why did she think money was important? Well, she kind of had a vague answer about how it was a good thing, and just, society or her parents had encouraged her to think about that. So it seemed to me that she was in the kind of the external formula stage of self-authorship.
But which theory was that?
Baxter-Magolda's theory, again, same one we talked about earlier. Because she was not really thinking for herself in terms of choosing a major, she was kind of going with what other people were influencing her towards. But now that she was at college and she was taking the classes, she was starting to be challenged toward thinking about something else because she wasn't enjoying it and starting to wonder, okay, so I'm not enjoying it already, this is not a good sign. And that was kind of helping her, I think, to start shifting into the crossroads phase. So I encouraged her in terms of finding a lot more information and doing more exploring, because I figured more information will help her start to develop her own internal voice. So I encouraged her to go to the Career Center and maybe take some personality tests or find out what other degrees are available in areas that she's interested in, and maybe be able to talk to a professor in some of those other areas that she was considering. She was thinking maybe health related field would be good, maybe being able to shadow someone. So I gave her some ideas about how she could gather information before she felt like she needed to make a final decision. Oop.
Oh. Well, that's my timer gone crazy. I'll just turn the whole thing off. Sorry for the interruption. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about some of the cautions you acknowledged with the student and how they influenced how you interacted with the student.
Well, I tried to be careful in terms of not assuming that she was in, this particular stage that I was feeling that she was in, and trying to make sure that I was providing information that would be helpful regardless, but also making sure that I wasn't viewing her as, a specific case study where I needed to make sure that she went and did these things. I was trying to make sure that I was there as a support and not as another external influence telling her what to do.
Okay. So you said a minute ago, maybe 5 minutes ago, that as a practitioner it's important to combine aspects of different theories. So are there any other theories that might apply to this student's situation besides Baxter and Magolda?
Sure. I think that it would be pretty easy to apply Schlossberg's transition theory in her case too, because part of her movement, I think, towards the crossroads phase or towards her questioning was her transition to college and how that was impacting her thoughts and some of the new influences that she was facing or experiencing in college from other people in the Hypatia community and from her professors and the classes, and just thinking about what support she had available in college that was new and different from what support she had available at home. So I think looking at the different contexts and things that had changed during her transition would also help to understand her situation more clearly.
Okay. Well, I think you've done a good job answering my questions. That seems to be about all we have time for. So thank you for coming in today, and I'll post your score by the end of the week. Thank you very much.